In this segment, we're going to talk about some problems in question answering. So we've presented so far an approach to this reading comprehension, span extraction, question answering paradigm using either this attentive reader model or BERT, and these approaches seem very nice. So what goes wrong here? So one of the common data sets for this is the Stanford question answering data set, which basically has sort of simple factoid questions like, what was Marie Curie the recipient of? She was the recipient of the Nobel Prize. And so, calling back to what we talked about when we talked about baselines, we said that sliding word n-gram windows wouldn't necessarily, a sliding window and then looking at n-gram match between the question and passage, we said that this wouldn't necessarily work. And it doesn't work, but this is sort of just one step up from that, where you have to deal with a little bit of paraphrasing, where, you instead of saying the recipient of, you say she was the winner of, or whatever. But BERT and other neural models can do this pretty easily. So this data set is just not all that hard. And BERT approaches get over 90% accuracy on it. And the performance on this is actually now quote unquote superhuman, where at least if humans aren't really all that careful about answering these questions, they will do less well than a BERT model. Does this mean that computers are better at question answering than humans are? No, absolutely not. It means that on this narrow data set, we've kind of maxed out what models are capable of. So here's a way to trick these models. This is work by Jian Liang from Stanford, where they made a new set of sentences to add to the contexts that they called distractors. So if the question was, what city did Tesla move to in 1807? They formed a very similar sentence. Tadakatsu moved to the city of Chicago in 1881, but they basically swapped in named entities for just like random, essentially garbage. And so this is unrelated to the passage, but they stick it on to the end, and then they ask, does the model pick this out, or does it pick out the original answer? And so here's another example from a paragraph about Super Bowl 50. So the question at the bottom here is, what is the name of the quarterback who was 38 in Super Bowl 33? And the answer, which I've drawn this red box around, is the past record was held by John Elway, who led the Broncos to victory in Super Bowl 33 at age 38 and is currently blah, blah, blah. All right, so that's the right answer, but it doesn't really look exactly like the question. And so when you add this sentence in blue at the end, quarterback Jeff Dean had jersey number 37 in Champ Bowl 34. Even though these entities are like totally unrelated, the sentence structure matches very well. And what this means is that models that are doing very well at the original squad task, so that's what's shown over here on the left, is performance on the raw task. And there's a whole bunch of models. You can see just how many people tried different approaches here. And then on the right, this add one cent approach is this adversarial data set where you add a sentence at the end that might trick models. And you can see that they go from 80% accuracy to 50% accuracy. These models typically cannot figure out whether the original answer is good or whether the new answer is good. And so there's this huge drop in accuracy. And what I should say is that this is not adversarial models in the way that's often used in computer vision, where it's like you change 2 pixels in a very tricky way to trick the model. This is like adding a sentence that just is kind of universal, right? So it's adding something that a human could very easily discard, and which is not even picked, like kind of customized for any individual model, but this tricks the existing models. All right, now you can train on these additional sentences and learn to reject them, right? But that's somehow not the point. The point is that we have not learned to solve QA in general. We've learned to solve this particular data set. And then if you add this one sentence and then you train on that, you're again learning to solve this particular data set. All right, another sort of problem with this was presented in this paper called Universal Adversarial Triggers by Wallace et al., where what they did is they found out that if you inserted the sentence, why, how, because to kill American people, at the end of a bunch of passages, you could basically get the model to return to kill American people as the answer between 10 and 50% of the time when the model was presented with a why question. And so the reason this works is because they sort of engineered this string, why, how, because, in this gradient-based way that they did a search over a whole bunch of strings and found that this is the string that the model really likes to kind of pick up on, right? But again, it's like by adding this irrelevant stuff, you get the model to pick out something that it really shouldn't be returning. And their argument here was that this is actually sort of dangerous in deployed systems because let's say someone edits Wikipedia to add this in there, and now Google is talking about killing American people when you type a question into Google search. Obviously, this has huge potential for abuse and big problems. So this establishes that these models are not actually as robust as we would hope. So what can we actually do to make things better? So one approach is to actually say, all right, let's solve real QA problems. And so this kind of calls back to that idea of answering questions based on all of Wikipedia. So like we have a whole bunch of documents and we need to do this initial information retrieval step before we do our reading comprehension span extraction piece. The thing about this setting is that it gives us contexts which are much trickier, and we'll see an example of that in a future segment. The other thing that people have looked at is harder QA problems. So this squad problem, again, is extracting relatively straightforward answers from questions which match very closely to a passage. And so people have thought about, all right, what about questions that are harder, or so-called multi-hop questions that require more complex reasoning? And so in the future segments, we're going to talk about both of these sort of ways of generalizing QA, making it work better, making it able to handle more types of data and work in more realistic settings. That's the end of this segment.